It's July 7th. Patrick Mahomes is very, very rich. $503 million over 10 years. The question to start this off is, who is the biggest winner of the Patrick Mahomes deal, Ben?
I'm going to say both of them. It's hard to say Patrick Mahomes isn't a big winner when he's earning $500 million. Obviously, the Chiefs win in that they're not paying Mahomes a bunch of money up front. It doesn't affect their salary cap all that much right now. And also they have some flexibility down the line. But for Mahomes, he has the contract guaranteed a year in advance, so there's not a ton of risk for the Chiefs to just cut him, and he still has the leverage to renegotiate down the line. So I think it's a good deal for both sides.
Yeah, well, I was also going to say both. I think
you guys are so lame.
Well, okay, so here's what I'll say. Like, I think I don't want to get into this too much, but whenever there's a contract that's signed under a salary cap, the owners always win, because in an uncapped market, Mahomes could go for even more than he did now. So I think that the Chiefs win in that area. And then, like everyone else saying, he's not tied to the cap, so the money that he's making is set. I also agree with Ben that if you're making that much money, and I think in his fifth year he's going to make $60 million in 1 year, that's fine. I think you win no matter what if you make $60 million in 1 year.
That's a much better take than your party sandwiches take from last night. So you're making improvements, Seth, and that's the correct answer. The Chiefs are the biggest winner here. It's not that Mahomes did not win. You can't lose when you're making that much money. That's the beautiful thing about being the best quarterback on the planet by a significant margin. But the Chiefs now have that best quarterback on the planet for 10 seasons, and they're paying him a ton of money deep into that contract. So yes, Mahomes does have some leverage, but they'll still be handing out some change. The good news for them is that they're not going to have to deal with this off-season saga, hopefully, in the very near future. We've seen what that did in basketball with LeBron, right? So they avoid any sort of decision situation. They lock down the best quarterback, and by the end of it, it will seem like a bargain. The Chiefs are the biggest winner.
It's not just basketball. We might be seeing it soon with Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, those guys too. So Steve Palazzolo came out with our first offensive line rankings of the season. So Seth, who was the biggest non-offensive line winner of those rankings?
I think it's hard not to go with Baker Mayfield. They improved so much on the offensive line. Now, one of the problems with Baker is that sometimes, even if the offensive line does its job on a play, he still creates pressure himself. And that's something that he himself will have to deal with. But with that said, they're going to be so much more solid up front for him that he can get back to being a top 15 quarterback. Like I think a lot of us thought he was going to be after year one. When he can play with timing, he can be a fantastic quarterback. His problem is anything under pressure. If it's not like perfect for him, he just looks like a duck out of water. So I think getting, a solid offensive line in front of him will go pretty hand in hand with his improvement in play. And obviously now you have a second year with Odell. Jarvis is there. So I think, the players around him are good, and he should get back to that kind of second half of 2018 play.
The play action numbers last year, the quickest time to throw off play action for Baker Mayfield. So I'm with you, and I would go Odell would be my number 2, but I'm not going to be boring like you guys with the white backgrounds here. I'm going all out. It's Phillip Rivers. He has the number 1 offensive line, and he's coming from Los Angeles, where the Chargers couldn't block anybody. They had a bunch of turnstiles on that offensive line. One of the most hit and sacked quarterbacks in the NFL over his time period there. In fact, has more hits and sacks allowed by tackles than any other quarterback. So this is going from awful to great for a guy that still has the ability to make throws when they're open. So it's a massive, massive uptick for Phillip Rivers.
This guy might not be going awful to great, but he's going awful to average, and that's Deshaun Watson. I know the Texans only came in around, I think they were 19th on the rankings, but they were one of the better lines in the league from stuff that Timo did on long developing pass plays. That's something that Watson does a ton. It's something he's going to do even more next year, probably with Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Kenny Stills. I think that sort of that improvement on the offensive line, young guys improving like Laramie Tunsil, Titus Howard, is going to be big for Deshaun Watson.
I think that if we go in the opposite direction, so the bottom 3 in Steve's OLine rankings are the Dolphins, the Bengals, and the Chargers. And I think that's interesting because all three of them have a rookie quarterback. One of them, Burrow, will probably start, so he's for sure going to go behind a pretty bad offensive line. And now LSU's offensive line wasn't great last year either, and he made plays out of structure and he made people miss. I don't know if you can do that in the NFL. We'll see.
I can't believe you brought LSU into this. I'm absolutely
wait till
shocked.
we talk about tight ends, George.
Oh my God.
So I thought those three, and the interesting thing is if you're going to have a bad offensive line, if you're the Dolphins or the Chargers, the difference is you have a veteran there who knows football a lot more than Herbert or Tua, can get into better protections, check better protections, protect himself better, even if the individual players in front of him aren't very good. So I think that's interesting. If you want to go with Tua or Herbert for those teams, that might be a big, big problem. You know, they're not really in a position to win right away with that O-line.
Agree.
So who do you guys think is the best, and we'll get to me last because I got a banger, but who do you guys think is the best tight end in the game going into the 2020 season?
This is an easy question. Look, it's down to two players. I don't know if you're going to bring in a third. If so, I'm going to have to kick you off the show. It's George Kittle, and here's why. He was already the best one last year, and I love the versatility that Travis Kelce brings. But Travis Kelce is also playing with the best offense and best offensive player in the league in Patrick Mahomes. George Kittle is really helping to elevate that offense, what he can do after the catch, what he can do breaking tackles, what he can do as a blocker. It's George Kittle with a bullet, in my opinion, though it's a clear number 2 for Travis Kelce, who's much closer to Kittle than number 3 is to Kelce.
Yeah, I think it's Kittle too, really, because what he does as a receiver and as a blocker. But I'll lay out the argument for Kelce if you were to pick him. And I think what he's doing as a receiver is more impressive just because the way the Chiefs use him. He lines up at wide receiver a lot more often, which means he's facing cornerbacks, safeties that specialize in covering the slot, things like that. Whereas Kittle is lining up in line, is getting into open space, Shanahan scheming him into open space where he can really take advantage of his skills after the catch. So I think that's the argument for Kelce, but I would go with Kittle too.
I'm 100% on board. Number 1 and 2 are Kittle and Kelce. I'd probably lean a little bit to Kittle, sorry. But then, like you said, they're clear number 1 and 2. The guy who I'm going to bring up, who I think is poised for a very big year, is New Orleans Saints tight end Jared Cook. We saw what he did in the second half of the season when Breeze was healthy. I think he gives Breeze a player who runs routes like he had with Jimmy Graham, with Marcus Colston, a big threat up the seam, which they haven't had. You know, Ben Watson was there for a bit in like kind of, you know, talking about the later Breeze years. Ben Watson was there, but certainly not even close to the dynamic ability that Jared Cook can produce. They even give him, you know, option routes underneath. So he is just an all-around talent. I think in terms of just that kind of 3 to 5, maybe 3 to 6 tight end grouping, I think Cook really could be in there, and I think he's going to have a big season.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.